Thomas Reynolds had inherited his family's century-old farm from his grandfather, a place of proud agricultural history nestled in the rolling countryside of central Iowa. The red barn, painted a deep crimson that had faded to a weathered rust-like hue, stood as a silent guardian of the Reynolds family legacy. Its wooden beams, hand-hewn by Thomas's great-grandfather in 1892, had witnessed generations of harvest, hardship, and hope. At 45, Thomas was a third-generation farmer who embodied the quiet resilience of rural America. His days began before sunrise, with the soft lowing of cattle and the rhythmic sounds of machinery preparing for another day of agricultural work. The barn was more than just a structure to him. It was a living museum of family history. Its loft still held his grandfather's original tools, rusted but carefully preserved. Vintage feed sacks from the 1950s hung preserved behind glass, and faded photographs documented every generation of Reynolds who had worked this land. Karen Milbrook represented a different world entirely. A recently retired marketing executive from Chicago, she'd purchased the adjacent 10-acre plot 2 years ago, with dreams of a picture-perfect country retirement. Her vision was stark and modern: clean lines, unobstructed views, a pristine landscape that looked more like a meticulously curated magazine's spread than a working agricultural environment. From the moment she arrived, Karen had been vocal about her displeasure with the barn. Her first encounter with Thomas occurred during the annual township community picnic. While local farmers discussed crop yields and equipment repairs, Karen cornered Thomas near the potato salad, her designer sunglasses perched dramatically on her nose. "That barn is an eyesore," she had stated matter-of-factly, gesturing with a manicured hand towards the historic structure. "It completely ruins the view from my new patio. Couldn't you paint it? Or better yet, tear it down?" Thomas remembered fighting back a mixture of amusement and irritation. He had smiled politely, a skill honed from years of diplomatic interactions with various stakeholders, and responded with practiced calm. "This barn has been standing longer than any house in the county. It's not just a building, it's a piece of our community's history." Karen had not been deterred. During subsequent neighborhood meetings, she consistently brought up the barn, presenting increasingly elaborate proposals. She commissioned a local architect to draft plans for modernizing the structure, suggesting everything from complete demolition to a radical redesign that would transform it into a view-friendly architectural feature. The local community watched the developing tension with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Rural townships like theirs had seen an increasing number of urban transplants seeking idyllic country living, often without understanding the practical realities of agricultural life. Thomas represented a dying breed, a farmer who saw land as something to be worked and respected, not merely consumed as a lifestyle aesthetic. What Karen failed to understand was that the barn was more than just a structure to Thomas. It was a living connection to his family's past. Every weathered board told a story of harvests survived, of economic depressions overcome, of wars that had taken young men from these fields and brought some back changed forever. The barn had survived the Dust Bowl, multiple economic recessions, and countless harsh Iowa winters. As autumn approached and the fields turned golden, the tension between Thomas and Karen continued to simmer. Neither was willing to back down, and both believed passionately in their perspective. The barn stood as a silent witness to their growing conflict, its red paint peeling slightly, casting long shadows across the fertile Iowa landscape. The conflict metastasized like a slow-burning infection within the community. Karen Milbrook was not the type to accept defeat quietly. Armed with a background in corporate marketing and a razor-sharp determination, she began a systematic campaign of harassment that would test the limits of rural patience and legal boundaries. Her first move was bureaucratic warfare. She filed a detailed complaint with the county zoning board, accompanied by a thick portfolio of professionally prepared documents. Aerial photographs highlighted the barn's structural deficiencies, including several areas of weathered wood and a slight lean that she claimed posed a significant safety risk. She hired an independent structural engineer, a college friend from her Chicago days, to provide a damning report that suggested the barn was one strong wind away from collapse. Thomas found himself spending increasing amounts of time defending his property. County meetings that were once routine became battlegrounds of legal and aesthetic arguments. Karen would arrive impeccably dressed, her presentation materials color-coded and professionally bound, in stark contrast to Thomas's work boots and practical work attire. The local sheriff, Mike Holloway, became an reluctant mediator. A lifelong resident who had known Thomas's family for decades, he was torn between official neutrality and his personal understanding of rural traditions. "She's persistent, I'll give her that," Mike confided to Thomas during one of his routine property checks. "But she doesn't understand how things work out here." Thomas discovered the first surveillance camera hidden in a cedar tree near his property line just after harvest season. It was professionally installed, with a clear view of the barn and much of his working area. When confronted, Karen claimed it was for wildlife monitoring, but Thomas knew better. The camera was positioned too precisely, its lens pointed directly at the barn's most vulnerable angles. Anonymous letters began to arrive. Some were official-looking, suggesting code violations. Others were more personal, typed missives that criticized the barn's appearance, questioned Thomas's maintenance practices, and hinted at potential environmental concerns. Each was carefully worded to skirt the edges of harassment while maintaining a veneer of legitimate concern. The local farming community started to take sides. Old-timers like Robert Jenkins and Frank Martinez would stop by Thomas's farm, offering support and sharing stories of similar conflicts with newcomers. "City folk," Frank would say, shaking his head, "they want the pretty picture of country living without understanding the work behind it." But not everyone was supportive. Some newer residents, drawn to the area by glossy real estate magazines promising a pastoral escape, began to side with Karen. They saw the barn as an eyesore, a relic that didn't fit their curated vision of rural life. Community barbecues and local gatherings became increasingly tense, with subtle conversations and barely concealed arguments. Karen's next move was more calculated. She began researching historical preservation laws and local ordinances with the precision of a corporate lawyer. She discovered an obscure county regulation about historical structures and began to build a case that the barn was neither historically significant enough to preserve nor structurally sound enough to remain standing. Thomas realized this was more than just a dispute about a view or a building. It was a battle about belonging, about the very definition of community. Each letter, each complaint, each surveillance camera was a calculated assault not just on his barn, but on his entire way of life. Little did he know, Karen was just getting started. The real conflict was about to escalate in ways no one could have predicted. The night of October 17th would be etched into Thomas Reynolds' memory forever, a night when the darkness seemed to pulse with an unnatural, threatening energy. He had spent the evening working late, reviewing harvest records and preparing for the upcoming agricultural assessment. His daughter Emma, a junior at Iowa State University studying agricultural sciences, had just called to discuss her latest research project on sustainable farming techniques. Around 11:30 p.m., the phone rang again. This time, it was Sheriff Mike Holloway, his voice tense and urgent. "Thomas, you need to get out here now. There's been an incident at your farm." The drive felt like an eternity. Thomas's mind raced through 1,000 possibilities, none preparing him for the reality that awaited. As he crested the hill leading to his property, the horizon was illuminated by an unholy orange glow. His barn, his family's historical landmark, was engulfed in flames that reached desperately toward the night sky. Volunteer firefighters from 3 surrounding counties had already assembled, their red trucks creating a stark contrast against the burning red of the barn. Water cannons fought a losing battle against the inferno that consumed generations of family history. Thomas could only watch in shock as decades of memories turned to ash before his eyes. The barn's wooden beams, which had weathered countless storms and supported 3 generations of Reynolds farmers, now crackled and popped like kindling. Vintage farming equipment, some dating back to his grandfather's era, melted and warped in the intense heat. Stored grain, carefully harvested just weeks earlier, fueled the blaze that consumed everything in its path. Local firefighters worked with a desperate intensity. Frank Martinez, an old family friend, approached Thomas with a grim expression. "It's total loss," he said quietly, placing a supportive hand on Thomas's shoulder. "Whatever started this fire, it was deliberate. This wasn't no accident." Forensic investigators began their initial assessment even as the flames continued to rage. Thomas overheard fragments of their conversation. Accelerant, multiple points of ignition, definitely arson. Each word felt like another blow to his already devastated spirit. The local news crew arrived shortly after, their van's lights spinning in the chaotic scene. Young reporter Sarah Thompson approached Thomas, her microphone extended. "Mr. Reynolds, can you tell us what you think happened?" Thomas's mind immediately went to Karen Millbrook. Their ongoing dispute played like a horrific montage in his memory. Her complaints, the surveillance cameras, the constant legal harassment. But he said nothing, understanding that speculation would help no one. As dawn began to break, revealing the smoldering ruins of what had once been a proud family landmark, Thomas stood in shock. The barn was more than just a building. It was a repository of family memories. Photographs of his ancestors, tools passed down through generations, records of every harvest and hard time his family had endured, all gone in a single night of calculated destruction. Sheriff Holloway approached with a clipboard and a grave expression. "We're treating this as a potential arson," he said. "We'll need you to come down to the station later today to make a formal statement." The unspoken implication hung in the air. They both knew exactly who the primary suspect would be. The surrounding fields, which had always been a symbol of life and productivity, now felt like a crime scene. Thomas's working dogs sat nearby, confused by the destruction and the acrid smell of burning wood and memories. In the distance, the first light of day began to illuminate the devastation, a cruel reminder that life would continue, with or without the barn that had been the heart of his family's legacy. The courthouse in Oak Ridge County had never seen a case quite like this. What began as a neighborly dispute had transformed into a criminal prosecution that captured the attention of the entire region. Thomas Reynolds sat with his court-appointed attorney, Mark Daniels, a local lawyer known for his meticulous preparation and deep understanding of rural legal complexities. Karen Millbrook arrived each day in a carefully curated ensemble that seemed designed to project innocence and refinement. Her legal team, led by Gregory Hartman, a high-powered defense attorney from Des Moines, presented a strategy of calculated denial and character assassination. They attempted to paint Thomas as an unstable farmer with a vendetta, suggesting that he might have burned his own barn for insurance money. The forensic evidence, however, told a different story. Fire investigator Robert Chen presented a damning report that left little room for interpretation. Multiple points of ignition, a specific type of accelerant, and trace evidence all pointed to a meticulously planned act of arson. Surveillance footage from a neighboring farm showed a vehicle matching Karen's luxury SUV near the Reynolds property on the night of the fire, captured just hours before the blaze began. Emma Reynolds, Thomas's daughter, became an unexpected key witness. Her expertise in agricultural sciences and her detailed documentation of the barn's historical significance provided crucial context. She testified about the irreplaceable historical artifacts and farming equipment that had been destroyed, items that could never be monetarily compensated. The trial exposed the deeper tensions within the rural community. Longtime residents testified about Karen's persistent harassment, her numerous complaints, and her apparent determination to reshape the landscape to her personal preferences. Neighbors recounted conversations and incidents that demonstrated her increasingly aggressive approach to the barn dispute. Karen's defense team fought back aggressively. They attempted to discredit witnesses, questioned the forensic evidence, and tried to create reasonable doubt. Gregory Hartman's cross-examinations were calculated and aggressive, attempting to portray Thomas as an unreasonable farmer clinging to an outdated structure. The most dramatic moment came when Thomas himself took the stand. Unlike Karen's polished performance, he spoke with a raw, unvarnished honesty that resonated with the jury. He described generations of his family's history tied to the barn, the memories destroyed, and the emotional toll of losing a piece of his family's legacy. Financial records became a critical component of the prosecution's case. Investigators uncovered a series of communications between Karen and a local real estate developer. These documents suggested a potential motive beyond the simple dispute over the barn's appearance. The developer had been interested in purchasing both Thomas's and Karen's properties, with the barn being a significant obstacle to a potential large-scale development project. Local media coverage transformed the trial into more than just a legal proceeding. It became a symbolic battle between traditional rural life and the encroaching pressures of urban development. Newspapers ran headlines like "Barn of Contention" and "Neighbor versus Neighbor," the trial that divided a community. As the trial entered its final stages, the tension was palpable. The jury, composed of local farmers, small business owners, and community members, listened intently to closing arguments that were about far more than just a single barn. This was a case about respect, community, and the changing face of rural America. Thomas sat quietly, his weathered hands clasped together, understanding that the verdict would be about more than just his personal loss. It would be a statement about the values of a community caught between preservation and progress. The trial's aftermath reverberated through Oak Ridge County like a seismic event, exposing deep fractures within the community that had long simmered beneath a veneer of rural tranquility. What had begun as a dispute between two neighbors became a referendum on belonging, progress, and the changing nature of rural American life. Local coffee shops and community centers became battlegrounds of conversation. The old-timers, represented by men like Frank Martinez and Robert Jenkins, saw the case as a clear-cut defense of agricultural heritage. They spoke passionately about the importance of preserving family histories, of respecting the land and its stories. To them, Thomas Reynolds represented something more than just a farmer. He was a guardian of local traditions. Younger residents and recent transplants found themselves divided. Some sided with Karen, arguing that rural communities needed to modernize and adapt. They saw the old barn as a symbol of stagnation, while Karen represented progress and aesthetic refinement. Others, particularly those with agricultural backgrounds or deep community roots, viewed her actions as an unforgivable assault on local values. Emma Reynolds emerged as an unexpected community leader during this tumultuous period. Her background in agricultural sciences and her articulate defense of her family's history provided a bridge between traditional farming culture and modern sensibilities. She began organizing community dialogues, creating forums where longtime residents and newcomers could discuss their perspectives constructively. The local media played a significant role in shaping public perception. The Oak Ridge County Gazette ran a series of in-depth articles exploring the broader implications of the case. Journalists delved into the challenges faced by rural communities, dealing with urban migration, changing land use, and conflicting visions of community development. Economic impacts began to surface. The trial and its surrounding controversy deterred potential new residents and investors. Real estate agents reported a cooling market, with potential buyers expressing concern about the community's apparent volatility. Local businesses found themselves caught in the crossfire, with some taking sides and others attempting to maintain neutrality. Most surprisingly, the conflict sparked a broader conversation about property rights and community integration. Neighboring counties began examining their own zoning laws and community mediation processes. Emma Reynolds found herself invited to speak at agricultural conferences and community development workshops, sharing insights about bridging generational and cultural divides. Karen Millbrook became a polarizing figure. Some viewed her as a victim of misunderstanding, while others saw her as a symbol of urban entitlement. Her supporters argued that she had been unfairly vilified, while her detractors pointed to the calculated nature of her actions against Thomas's barn. The local school district became involved, using the case as a unique learning opportunity. Civics classes discussed the legal and ethical dimensions of the conflict, exploring concepts of property rights, community values, and the complexities of rural-urban interactions. Students conducted research projects, interviewed community members, and analyzed the broader societal implications. Perhaps most profound was the impact on community relationships. Longtime neighbors, who had previously only exchanged perfunctory ways, now engaged in deep, meaningful conversations. The barn's destruction became a catalyst for reflection about heritage, about change, about the delicate balance between preserving history and embracing progress. As winter settled over Oak Ridge County, the burned-out shell of the barn remained a powerful symbol. It stood as a reminder of what was lost, but also of the resilience of a community capable of confronting its divisions and seeking understanding. The landscape had changed, but the spirit of the community remained unbroken. 3 years after the fire, Thomas Reynolds stood on the same ground where his family's historic barn had once stood, but the landscape was dramatically transformed. The legal battles had finally concluded, leaving behind a complex legacy that extended far beyond a simple property dispute. Karen Millbrook had been found guilty of arson and malicious destruction of property. The court ordered her to pay substantial restitution, not just to Thomas, but to the community. Her professional reputation was irreparably damaged. The real estate developer who had been quietly investigating the property withdrew all interests, and Karen was forced to sell her dream country home at a significant loss. The rebuilt structure was a testament to both preservation and innovation. Thomas worked closely with Emma to design a new barn that honored the historical significance of the original while incorporating modern sustainable agricultural technologies. Local craftsmen were hired to use some of the salvaged wood from the original barn, creating a physical link between past and present. Solar panels lined the roof, and advanced climate control systems promised to make the new barn more efficient than its predecessor. Emma's involvement transformed the project into something more than just a replacement building. She documented every step of the reconstruction, creating a multimedia project that became a case study in agricultural heritage and modern farming practices. Her work caught the attention of agricultural universities and preservation societies, turning the Reynolds barn into a symbol of resilience and adaptation. The community mediation program that Thomas helped establish became his most lasting contribution. What began as a response to his personal tragedy evolved into a model for resolving rural property disputes. Local schools began incorporating conflict resolution workshops, and neighboring counties started adopting similar programs. Financial compensation and community support helped Thomas rebuild, but the emotional recovery was more complex. The loss of irreplaceable family artifacts weighed heavily on him. Yet, through the process, he discovered a strength he hadn't known he possessed. Old photographs and family documents that had been digitized before the fire became a source of healing, allowing him to preserve the memories that the fire had threatened to erase. The burned barn became an unexpected tourist attraction of sorts. Visitors would stop by to hear the story, to understand the complex narrative of rural change. Local historians began documenting the case, seeing it as a pivotal moment in understanding the evolving dynamics of rural American communities. Karen Millbrook's final chapter was less triumphant. After losing the legal battle and her reputation, she moved to a small apartment in a nearby city. The dreams of her perfect country view had been consumed by the very fire she was accused of setting. Some community members found a measure of justice in her downfall, while others saw it as a tragic example of how personal conflicts can spiral out of control. For Thomas, the resolution was never about revenge. During a local community meeting, he spoke with characteristic humility. This wasn't about winning or losing, he told the gathered crowd. It was about understanding, about respecting each other's stories, each other's connections to this land. Emma continued to be the bridge between traditional farming and modern agricultural science. Her work ensured that the Reynolds family legacy would continue, not through preservation of an unchanging past, but through thoughtful evolution and innovation. As autumn approached, the same season that had witnessed the destructive fire years earlier, the new barn stood as a beacon of hope. It was more than just a building. It was a statement about community, resilience, and the delicate balance between honoring history and embracing change. The land, as it always had, continued to tell its story, one season at a time.